tight end of Minnesota Vikings history, and he's Director of Human Resources for Ryan Companies Incorporated, Steve Jordan. And fellas, thank you for coming today. And myself, as well as our virtual audience, is looking forward to today's chat. Before we get started in our discussion, I'll start with you, Anthony. What do you want students to come away with from today's discussion and conversation?
I just want it to be an open and honest conversation. Ask your questions, be curious, be respectful, obviously, and let's use this time as a learning experience to learn from one another. I'm going to learn just as much as the next person, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. What
about you, Coach?
Well, I agree with Anthony. I think hopefully that it's an open and honest conversation, and you never get too old to learn. A year ago when we did this, I learned some things about our history that I thought I knew everything about. So I think the biggest thing is that we share with one another, and that we all feel like we've gotten better from this experience today.
And lastly, Steve.
Yeah, I would just encourage the students to be curious and to go beyond. When it comes to Black history, go beyond what you hear about and what you learn in school. I actually grew up in a Black neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, and so we had a lot at our disposal in terms of learning. But I learned so much more beyond what I learned in school, about George Washington, Abe Lincoln, et cetera. You think you may know some things about it, but history is a lot deeper, and we have to understand it. So be curious and go beyond what you normally would get just in the school context.
Before we get to our Q&A, guys, make sure you use the Q&A feature in your Zoom webinar if you have any questions throughout the day. We'll have a live session at the end where you guys will be able to ask any questions that you may have for our panelists today. So feel free throughout the conversation just to use that button, and we'll get to your question before the meeting is over today. But first and foremost, guys, we got a question number one. And the first question, and I'll aim it at you, Anthony, and we'll go around and have a roundtable discussion, is, from your perspective, what is the value of knowing your history and heritage, and how has it impacted your journey?
I think it's really just understanding your self-worth and understanding, having a good idea as to where you come from, your culture, and it's a special thing. Sorry for the background noise. It's a special thing, and it's something that I think I kind of took for granted growing up, and I didn't really care to learn too much of when I was younger. I was focused on other things, but as I've gotten older, I feel like it's become more important to me, and especially given the kind of the way society is going right now, and all the tension that's kind of in our country that we've kind of seen the past year, 2020 specifically, having that understanding as to maybe why are things like this, how did things get to this point, and where do we go from here, and how can we kind of move forward as a community, as a people, and more specifically as a person, looking from within. And I think right now is a really good time to reflect. And 2020, for me at least, it was a tough year I'm sure for everybody, but I think it was a year of reflection, a year of looking back and trying to understand, kind of like I said, how did we get to this point? And so I think as I've gotten older, I've realized how important it is to have that educational piece as to the more specifically the African American culture.
What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I look at it and say, for Black History Month, sometimes that gets to be a little cliche, and there have been people that have written about the fact that Black History Month cannot be confined to just 28 days, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to go beyond that and learn more of that. And I can certainly appreciate that. I actually wrote an article recently in our corporate newsletter about what Black History Month means to me. And a part of it was about, again, learning, really going beyond, and I talked about this earlier, going beyond what you learn in school. We all get a little bit of a curriculum, and depending on what that is, you'll hear about that, again, Honest Abe, or, George Washington, that sort of thing. They don't tell you about the fact that those folks had slaves. They don't talk about our history, and we have to understand history because it has a tendency to repeat itself. So, for instance, as I've learned more about Black history, I've learned that it is a part of American history. It's not just Black history, it is integral to American history. You know, shortly after the slaves were emancipated back in 1865, in that time frame, there were actually 11 state congressmen that were Black in the state of North Carolina. And within one election cycle, and this is like within 30 years of that, think about that, slaves were freed. All of a sudden, we had 11 state elected officials in North Carolina, and including the mayor, all of them were ousted from their seats, meaning that militia came in, Klan came in, intimidation, voter suppression, and in one election cycle by 1898, within 30 years later, they were all gone. There was not another Black congressman elected in North Carolina until 1991, so 90 plus years later. So I talk about that to understand that, because you see the voter suppression and all the things that just happened in, say, Georgia, for instance, that just happened in this last election cycle. So Black history is a part of American history. And at the same time, we really need to go understand it, because you'll see that it again has a tendency to repeat itself.
Being from North Carolina myself, I learned about the Wilmington Insurrection of 1898, and I would highly recommend the audience to read up about that. Learning, I mean, we all hear about the Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma, but people don't hear about the insurrection of Wilmington in 1898. But moving on to you, Coach, when we're talking about this history, the Black history and your perspective, how has this impacted your journey?
Well, I think first I want to piggyback on what Steve and Anthony had to say. I think it's very important for us to have a great idea of our history, for us to have self-pride in who we are as people, because all of the messages that we get pounded on a daily basis still seem to tell us that we're less, that in whatever we choose to do, that we're less. And if you understand the great things that people of color have done, that Black Americans have done to help this society grow, it gives you pride of who we are as people. To me, that's number one. I think number two, like Steve said, it's easy for things to repeat itself when you don't have an understanding of how hard people worked, how much sacrifice they made to make things better for all of us. Okay. Now, do things still have to get better? Yes, they do. Okay. But I'm a child of the 60s. All right. So I remember having to ride on the back of the bus. Okay. I was bused to all white schools. I saw the black and white water fountains and bathrooms. Okay. In the South. So, so now here we are today, and we don't see those things. But if you don't have an appreciation that those things happened, and have an appreciation of the sacrifice and the hard work that people put in to get those things to change, it makes it a lot easier for those things to go backwards and happen again. So that's where Black history has meant a lot to me, and it's been very important to me to try to share that with young Black people. Because I think it's very important, like I said, that we have a great self-worth of who we are, and we take pride of who we are, and there's more to us than just being athletes. That's the thing that society sells us as athletes and entertainers. Okay, there's way more to us than that, and I think it's important that we get that message out there.
And I mean, when you talk about those athletes, I mean, LeBron James, I think that's like the poster athlete, the shut up and dribble, and how that pretty much reflected how, athletes are starting to use their voice. It's like, hey, we're bigger than just, somebody dribbling or playing on the football field. And, for you guys like Bar, you're in the league right now. So like, how do you feel athletes should take advantage of, their voice in the community to be able to reflect, the world?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a responsibility as athletes and role models. I think firstly, it's important to know that it's something that you have to be passionate about, and something you want to do, because people can see right through the fake. And if you're just doing it just to show face or to make a headline, that's not going to last, and your works are going to fall by the wayside. But for something you're truly passionate about, something that you really care about, then get out there and educate yourself, and then go out there and my big thing is really time over money. Obviously you got to fund, organizations, you got to fund and help support different organizations. But from my experience, it's really about being with the people, being in the community. Being in the community and showing face and being around and talking to these people and kind of getting an understanding as to what their feelings are, what their thoughts are. And I think that's where the majority of the impact is. And a lot of it starts with the youth. And one thing I've been inspired by, just going to protests the last year, the majority of people out there are younger than me. And from what I see, and it's all different races and all different colors and all different, religious beliefs and genders and what have you. And I think the one great thing about this upcoming generation, they've been exposed to so much. Social media, for one, it just gives you a gateway to see so many different things and understand and appreciate, so many different cultures. And so for an athlete like myself, and for a almost 30-year-old biracial man, it was inspiring to be boots on the ground and see these the youth kind of come together and kind of being like, this is enough. Like we've seen enough. And for me personally, it's important to be present and to practice what I preach.
Steve, you have a son that plays in the NFL, and he's one of many athletes that uses their platform to express his voice. So how do you think guys like your son, I mean, yourself being a former athlete, how do you feel like athletes should, continue to take advantage and use their voice in their community?
I think it's big, like Anthony talked about, as athletes and coaches as well. I mean, as athletes, we're much more than just entertainers. And I look and see some of the differences. The reality is that players have been very integral in terms of being activists going back into the day. When you think about it, Fritz Pollard, who was technically the first Black coach in the NFL back in 1921 with the Akron Pros, and he did some things. He broke some barriers back then. And while he definitely had to be in a different space because of the climate and the era and the time. But he did things. He just made it happen and broke barriers. Now go forward, and I looked at a picture just the other day that had a number of athletes together at a very different time. I think this was in the 60s or 70s, but it had Jim Brown in the picture, Muhammad Ali, Kareem was in it, and Bill Russell was in it. And then there were a number of other athletes, and they were all there because they were making a statement about the fact that they did not believe and wanted to make a better place for what was happening in our society at the time. In other words, it was major oppression, major injustices, and they basically came together and said, "Hey, we're not taking that anymore. We want to stand up for our people." And now the difference, though, is that was a place and time, and that could get suppressed in certain regards. But you look at today with social media, that's the difference maker, in my opinion. So as I look at that and I see where my son is going with it, and it has gone with it with his team, with the New Orleans Saints, I tell him same thing. It's like, hey, you definitely want to step out again, be authentic, keep it real, and but at the same time, you have to be respectful and try to educate people, and it has to be sustainable too. So those are things that I know he's tried to do. And again, to use that platform, particularly that social media platform, to really amplify the message.
Coach, what are your thoughts? Because you have a unique perspective also.
Gabe, I tell you a funny story. When I coached with the Cleveland Browns, I had the opportunity to spend a great deal of time with Jim Brown because he would be around a lot. And the first conversation I had with him was just getting to meet the great Jim Brown, an idol and all those kind of things. And then we started to sit down at lunch or at a dinner and have conversation. And he started to tell me stories about what it was like for him at Syracuse. The best running back to ever play, the best lacrosse player to ever play lacrosse at Syracuse, which I had no idea. I'm from California. I never even knew what lacrosse was, okay? He's the best to ever play the game, okay? And, then the best to ever play, best running back in the history of the University of Syracuse, and the way he was treated and where he had to sleep in different places than other guys on the team, okay? Where they got thousands of people cheering for him, okay, but yet he's got to stay in a different place, and then when he went to the Cleveland Browns, he's the best running back maybe all time in the history of the NFL. And the things that he had to endure, you would think, that a guy like that would not have to go through that. And the biggest thing that went through my mind is black is black. If you understand what I'm saying to you, black is black. It don't matter how much money you make. It don't matter how much fame you have. It don't matter. You're going to always be black, okay? And so the thing that ends up happening is people forget that. They think fame and fortune, okay, alleviates that. It doesn't, okay? The day you came out of your mom, you were black. And the day they put you in the ground, you're going to be black, right? So you better learn how to know what it's like to be black. You better learn to know to take pride in what it's like to be black, because you're never going to get rid of it. And that was a huge eye-opener for me to have those conversations with Jim Brown. I was a grown man at that time. I was a grown man. I wish I would have known those things when I was younger. I wish I had heard those experiences when I was younger. And so that's the value that athletes can bring, because they have a different perspective, because people out there think that they have it all. They see it on the bottom of the screen on ESPN, how much money they have. They see the nice suits they wear on game day, the beautiful cars, all the bling bling, okay? But they still have some of the same issues that everyday ordinary black people have. Why? Because they're black.
That's a great point. Great point. Students, be sure to use the Q&A function in your Zoom webinar to ask questions. We got a few questions coming in, but I want to make sure you guys have your questions answered before the event is over today. So feel free to use that button. But Coach, I'm gonna stay with you for this next question. What habits can students work on now to make a positive impact in their community?
Well, I think first of all is to have a quest for knowledge. Have a hunger for knowledge. Get to know more about your people, which will in turn get you to know more about yourself. And I think to have the ability to share, have the ability to want to give back, to help us all continue to grow and all to get better. I think, Anthony talked about it earlier. One of the things that happened during all of the protests, I grew up in the protest era, in the 60s. And to see all those young people out there of all different races and backgrounds, that just touched my heart. That touched my heart, and so to me, I think the more that our youth can get involved in things to be able to give back and to go out there and gain as much knowledge about, our people and the struggles that we have and the things that people have done to make things better. I think it will help energize them. I think it will help them say, hey, we're never gonna turn around and let things go back. We're gonna always strive to get things to continue to improve, and our voices need to be heard and not be afraid to speak. And so I think, numbers help you have strength in your voices. You know what I mean? The more people that are out there, sharing those, that has strength. And that was what causes change to happen. So I would say, Gabe, that's the biggest thing for me.
Sound like the Golden State Warriors, Coach, strength in numbers.
There it is.
Steve, I'm going to ask you the same question. What can students do to make a positive impact within their community?
Yeah, I've been really encouraged to hear about what students are doing. And, particularly like, say the Gen Z, people always try to label the generations and stuff, the Gen Z, who tend to be very digitally savvy and have a lot of capability of going online. But again, the habits that would make it successful, again, I would say, like Coach said, you got to learn. You really do have to have some knowledge about what's going on and really understand some of the details of it, because there's a lot out there that that's pretty easy to just overlook and say, okay, hey, you know, there's still discrimination, there's still inequities, you know, that type of thing. But you really need to try to get into the detail of it to try and understand how to solve these problems. So one of the things I encourage kids to do, again, is to get educated, but then also, you know, work together, you know, because they have really powerful voices. You know, when you think about it, people are listening a lot more to youth. And when you think about some of the, you know, the shootings that have happened at some of the high schools, and see some of those students that have rallied and, you know, called congressmen on the carpet and said, what are you going to do? You know, now that's the type of thing that I think can get traction. So again, these habits that you talk about of, you know, how to encourage students to do certain things, I say learn, understand the details, try to collaborate, because again, there is power in numbers for sure. And then utilize the digital resources that you can, because that's what's out there, and that's something that's just more direct, and people listen to that. Companies listen to it, frankly, corporations, all of that. I mean, it's amazing how much youth is getting heard these days.
Before we get to our student questions, Bar, I'm going to ask you the same question. What can students continue to do to make a positive impact?
Yeah, just piggybacking on what these gentlemen have said already. I think, first of all, question everything. Whether you know it to be true or not, you know, if somebody tells you something, ask why, and question everything. Don't settle just for just the run-of-the-mill answer. You know, try to go into detail and into depth, and force and challenge the people that are educating you to explain things to you on a complicated, intricate level. First of all, I think. Second of all, try and make yourself uncomfortable. Go and try something different, and go expose yourself to something different. Maybe something you haven't tried before. I think the more you expose yourself to, the more tolerant you become. The more tolerant you become, the more you understand different cultures, different backgrounds, and you realize we're all really the same at the end of the day. We all want the same thing. We just want to be happy, healthy, provide for our family, and be loved, really, at the end of the day, no matter if you're black, white, yellow, purple, green, it doesn't matter, male, female. I think that's what any human truly wants. And then lastly, I would just say, you know, volunteer and go put your feet on the ground and go see, go and go see something different. Go, like I said earlier, go try something different. And the more you can do that, I think the better you'll be for it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys' insight thus far. I know it's a lot of great advice for our audience today, but I want to move on to the next portion of today's event where students can ask you guys questions. So we had a number of students from across the state of Minnesota submit their questions ahead of time via video, along with a couple of students electing to ask their questions live. So students had the option to pick if they wanted to ask a question to a specific panelist or to all of them. So the first question is to all the panelists, and it is from Dre from Altman Middle School, who is attending this event to help develop his research project. And his question to the panelists is, did you ever play any sports before football? And I'm gonna start with you, Bar.
Yeah, football was, I didn't start playing football until I was about 9 or 10. The first sport I played was basketball. It was just the easiest and simplest to pick up. You play by yourself, go in the backyard, pick up a ball and put in the hoop. You know, I think that was the very first sport I played. I ran track, soccer, you know, a lot of different things. Just being outside, really. Tag, I don't know if that was a sport, but back then, you know, when I was a kid, that was a huge sport. You know, hide and seek. We had crazy games of that. You know, so just being outside and running around, interacting with kids. You know, that's why I grew up. I mean, I definitely kind of grew up in the beginning of the video game era when I was about 7, 8. I think that's when Nintendo came out with the Mario Kart. But at that point, I was so conditioned to be outside and run around and have a good time that it didn't really matter what it was: kickball, basketball, handball. I played it all.
What about you, Steve?
Yeah, kind of the same. You know, I did a little bit of everything. You know, played basketball, you know, baseball, you know, you name it. I was also in that era that was pre-organized sports, you know, to the level that we have today. it's unfortunate that kids don't get a chance to just play pickup, just pick up football, pick up basketball, kids on the block get together. And I was kind of toward the young end of the kids on my block. So my game got a little stepped up just because I was playing with older kids most of the time. And even when I went to high school, I started playing organized football a little late. I started in the 8th grade, and because my mom wouldn't let me play because she thought I'd get hurt. And then ultimately I ended up playing basketball. Actually was a better tennis player than I was a football player in high school. I was a 3-year letterman in tennis. And so I really advocate that for kids to try to go cross sports, because you'll learn a lot, use different muscle sets. The hand-eye coordination that I learned in tennis contributed to my ability to catch balls in football. So I did a lot of sports. Again, love sports in general. I just love being outside playing.
What about you, Coach?
Yeah, I was a lot like Steve. I grew up before the video game era, so we were outside all the time, like Anthony. We played football in the middle of the street, not on grass. We played football in the middle of the street. We played strikeout, which was a form of baseball when you only had 2 people. So we played strikeout. We played basketball. We were always outside doing something that had to do with all different kinds of sports. I didn't play football on a football team until I was in the 7th grade. Baseball was my sport. I started off Little League Baseball. Once you play Little League Baseball, you make all-star teams and all that. Oh, baseball was my deal, and then when I got to high school, being a big guy walking on the campus, the football coach goes, "Hey, man, you need to be playing football." So, and it was just around the time where it started to change a little bit, where at my high school, the baseball was real serious. Not saying that football was not, but if you were going to be on the varsity baseball team, then that means you had to play winter baseball, which means you could not play football. So you had to make a decision. So when I got in the 10th grade, I was on the varsity starting offensive lineman, and then I was a starting catcher on the baseball team. And then the end of that season, the coach was like, "You got to make a decision." And I chose football, which surprised everybody. But I agree with Steve. I think the more that young people can do in different sports, and take your time to just say, "I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that." You never know which one is going to be the one that pans out to be the one that you can do great things with. So I think it helps you to be exposed to all different kinds of sports.
For sure, for sure. Next question is from Michael from West Education Center. And Steve, this will be a question for all the panelists, but this one I'm going to start with you, because you've played in the league where kneeling for the national anthem wasn't allowed at all. Now, where your son is, where he's playing now, it's encouraged, right? So, what are your thoughts on kneeling during the national anthem? This is from Michael.
Right. I applaud that effort, to be honest. I mean, I look back and think about what Colin Kaepernick started. That was such a bold move, and the impact that it had throughout not only the U.S., but worldwide. And, here we are, a lot of times athletes, like I talked about, whether it was the 60s or even the 20s, talked about inequities and the injustices that were happening. And frankly, it wasn't getting a lot of traction. And all of a sudden, Colin Kaepernick takes a knee. And the next thing you know, the president of the United States, then Barack Obama, was being asked about it. So now the president is talking about it. And so that impact was just huge. The other thing, and even with Cam, and Anthony and Coach probably know this and see this as well, one of the things we always talk about is that for a team, you need to have a united front. And so we try to, have teams come out and do the same thing, right? Either everybody's going to kneel or nobody's going to kneel. And that's kind of, happened for the most part. Although there are a lot of times when only a few guys are going to take that knee, but at least their teammates have bought in and supported. And one of the things that was a reality for me that I was frankly disappointed in, but it is what it is, in talking to Cam, I mean, you've got different, opinions in your locker room. And there are going to be people that are going to say, "Hey, you know what? I don't really feel this kneeling thing. I don't really want to do that." But you know what? As a team, we have to come to together on that. So either, and again, if everybody's not going to kneel, then you at least got to understand it well enough to support each other in that. And he had some difficult conversations in the locker room. He's also a team captain, and so he's had some difficult conversation in the locker room before they hit the game field, and that's a challenge. So again, I applaud the taking of the knee. It is respectful. It is something that we had to have a conversation, and it did just that. It generated a lot of conversation, even corporately. I mean, I've had more conversations with my Caucasian colleagues that we never would have had that level of in-depth conversation until the kneeling happened.
How about you, Ant?
Yeah, I think, for my perspective at least, with Colin Kaepernick there, I think that was the ultimate sacrifice, right? He essentially sacrificed his livelihood to make a point and to bring attention to a cause, which still continues to happen every day. And I think at first the league was like, I think there's no doubt as to why he's not in the NFL right now. I think we all understand he's not in the NFL because he took that knee, even though the NFL will defend the stance saying that it's not why. At least from my perspective, that's why. And now, you fast forward to today and this season, and it was almost like flipped to where if you didn't take a knee, then you were seen as a racist, right? So you were seen as somebody that, oh, why aren't you kneeling? Are you okay with police brutality? Are you okay with social injustice? In my perspective, it differs for each person, and everybody feels differently about a national anthem, standing, taking a knee, what have you. I think the important part is, in our locker room, which I thought was unique and pretty cool, was we had a conversation, open, honest conversations. And why are you going to knee? Explain that to me. Why aren't you going to knee? Explain that to me. And if I feel good about your explanation, I'm not gonna have a problem with you standing or kneeling. It's really depending on, it's a case-to-case thing. And I think the media tried to play it to where, oh, everyone's kneeling, being disrespectful to the flag, to the military. Now it's oh, you're not taking a knee, you're okay with social injustice. I don't think it's that black and white. I think there's a lot that kind of goes on in between the lines. And then lastly, we, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, not too far from we play our football games at US Bank Stadium. And we hosted his family. So I believe the opening game of the season. And while they were there, they were going to play a tribute to him. And we're all like in locker room, like, okay, when they play this tribute, we're going to take a knee. And it was actually one of the rookies that came up and he's like, well, George Floyd was knelt on, a knee was put on his neck. Do you think it's respectful to knee during that time? Because it's kind of signifying what just happened. And it kind of took us by surprise, like, oh, wow, that's a great point. Maybe we don't kneel for that instance. And we stand unified as a team. So I don't think it's as simple as being racist or disrespectful. I think the conversation needs to happen. And if you can have that conversation and understand where someone's coming from, then whatever your decision is okay.
Coach?
Gabe, I heard this a long time ago, through sacrifice and tragedy, great change can happen. And firsthand, I got to be involved with our players and how they dealt with that whole thing. And it's probably the most proudest moment I've had as a football coach. Anthony was right on point when he talked about Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick sacrificed his career, for something that was very, very important to him. And I know Anthony will remember this. When that happened that year, we formed a group and we had that discussion in the room. And I made that comment in that room. Okay, if it's that important to you, and you're willing to accept the consequences that comes along with it, then do it. Okay? Don't do it just because it's the cool thing to do. Don't do it so you're shown on highlights on ESPN, okay? Because there's huge consequences that come along with it, all right? But if it's something that's important to you and you believe that to the core of your body, then do it, okay? I didn't tell one guy in that room not to do it. I just told him the reality of the situation. You see what I'm saying? Well, now you fast forward to last year, after what happened to Mr. Floyd, we had candid conversations in our locker room, and the guys spoke from their heart on what they believed in. Okay, and then obviously the kneeling thing came up, and we postponed a practice so the players could visit with one another and talk things through and where they wanted to go. So in my opinion, it made us stronger, as a team. It helped us get to know one another better and how guys think and how they tick and what's important to them. And some of the tragedies that had gone on in their lives, with themselves, with their family members, okay? Because like I said before, people think that we're bulletproof because we're professional athletes, but life goes on. You still deal with the normal things that everybody else deals with in their lives. It doesn't change for you just because you're a professional football player. So it was a tremendous moment, for me to be able to see, our players, talk things through and visit with each other. So I thought it was a great growing moment for our football team.
For sure. This next question is from Dominic, and Steve, I'll address it to you. With athletes having a platform, people in this stature having a platform, but still not being able to change laws. I mean, they can bring awareness, but not change laws, go into a legislation building and say, okay, this is how the law is going to change. So do you think lawmakers can help African-American communities any more than what they're doing right now?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They can do more. And again, kind of the old adage of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So those people who are more vocal, those people who are more insistent and have perseverance. That was the other thing I mentioned. I should have mentioned earlier to students when you want to do activism and things of that nature. You have to have perseverance, because this is a long game. It's not about just, hey, I think this injustice is here and we should change it. Let me go, show up with my city councilman and say something and it'll get done. It's not like that. It is about, being very vocal, being persistent, and that type of thing. So certainly I think that legislation can happen, and there's a lot more that can help the African American communities, and it needs to happen. But we have to be out there, and that's the same thing for students. Students, again, have a unique opportunity in today's world to be out there at the forefront, and to voice their opinions and to try to make some things happen. I think I heard just the other day there's about 130 something pieces of legislation that are being proposed in states around the country that all are going to be targeted towards voter suppression. So, not being able to do early balloting, or not being able to do balloting on Sundays, which is really hitting Black and brown communities. So that's 136 pieces of legislation that's out there. So think about how much legislation we can impact and influence if we get out there and we get with our city councilmen, we get with our state legislators, we get with our national legislators, but we have to be vocal and we have to get out there and we have to be loud and persistent to make it be heard.
Couldn't say that any better. This next question is from John Clifton for you, Bar. He asks, what do you have to say to those individuals that say athletes should not bring politics into the game?
I mean, it's kind of hard not to, and it's I almost feel like it's a duty of mine to educate not only myself but other young aspiring athletes, or really just young minorities, to get involved and understand politics and understand why things are the way they are. And if you don't understand how we've gotten here as a group of people, as the Black community, and this is just going to continue to happen. The cycle is going to continue to go on. So I don't see why I would sit by and not bring politics into it and just sit by and watch this, injustice occur over and over again. For example, I was on a call with Roger Goodell with my friend Eric Hendricks, and, we brought up to him, every summer during training camp, there's mandated meetings on how to act in the workplace, on what equipment to wear, how to wear your socks. Okay, but there was no mandated meeting on voting or registering to vote or even learning that process. About last year at this time, I think we signed off on a CBA, collective bargaining agreement between the NFLPA and the NFL. And about half the players didn't even vote on their own CBA, which directly affects their financial, their pockets in their future. So if that's the case, if there's half the guys that aren't going to vote on something that directly affects, the 2,000-3,000 guys in the NFL, how many of those guys are actually going and voting and making, big time votes that are going to impact their local communities? I would guess not many. So now we have, after that conversation this summer, we had a meeting with Rock the Vote. We got everyone on the team registered to vote and kind of at least empower the people to make a decision whether they want to vote or not. And hopefully that continues going forward for the NFL. So I don't see any reason why I would just sit back. I mean, when I was younger, I probably would have kept quiet just because I didn't really know too much going on. I didn't want to step on any toes. But I mean, as I've gotten older, I kind of care less about what people have to think, and doing the right thing is more important to me than the optics.
Well said. Well said. Coach, I'm reading the comments right now, and everybody's saying Coach Patterson's passion is unshakable. How can you not listen to him and not be a better version of yourself? So this next question is from Lucas, and he asks, as a kid, how can he motivate people around him?
Yeah, I think like we've said before, I think number one, not to be afraid to speak up. Number two, understanding that it's okay for someone to have a different point than you. Okay, it's okay. You're not trying to change everybody's mind. The thing you're trying to do is get people to listen. To me, that's the key. The key is, can you sit down and have a conversation and actually have someone listen to you? Okay? Because most of the times when you're having a deep conversation, the other person is thinking about their response. They're thinking about how they're going to change your mind instead of them listening to what you have to say. They don't have to agree with you, okay? But if they really listen to what you have to say, usually you have a way to find some common ground. And I think the biggest thing is for young people is not to be afraid, to speak up. Dave, a thing popped in my head, that's funny, but also kind of encouraging. I wonder how many young people have heard the song from James Brown, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud." Okay, and I know Steve remembers this. Okay, if people just think of it as a song, okay, it's just a great song that James Brown came up with, but they don't know the history of that song. Okay, James Brown is seeing the Watts riots and seeing our people just get devastated on TV and turning water hoses on them, hitting them in the head with clubs, just getting destroyed, okay? And in his mind, he tried to find a way to give us some kind of pride as a people, okay? And he stayed up all night and wrote that song. Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And you know what? For my age group, it worked. It worked. Okay, you listen to that song, and when you walk down the street, you were on your toes. You had a pep in your step. You see what I'm saying? It worked. And so to me, as we talk about Black history, and like Steve said, it's more than just a month, 28 days. When we talk about it, those kind of things have made a big difference in us being able to go out there and fight for change.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I appreciate your time today. We got about 5 minutes, but 5 minutes left today. But before we wrap, let's give our guests a virtual clap today and thank them for spending their time to speak with all of us today. And also give yourself a virtual clap for participating in today's conversation. Before we get out of here, we're going to take one quick screenshot, and I'm going to count us down. So if we can all, come up a little closer to the camera and just smile. I'm going to count down from 5, and I think Mariah from Everfi will snap it. And I'm going to count us down now. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. Lastly, I want to get you guys' final thoughts before we get out of here, and I'm going to start with you, Steve.
Yeah, I would just, I say, number one, thanks to the Vikings for being involved in this and helping to facilitate this, getting it out to the students. Last thoughts, again, Black history, walk away knowing that Black history is an integral part of American history, that we have to know it, and we have to commit to doing that. So make that commitment, because that'll be some of the foundation that you use as you talk to others, to educate them, to inspire them, to try to bring about change. A lot of this Black history is the foundation of that. That's it.
What about you, Bar?
Yeah, just thanks to Steve and Coach Dre and you, Gabe, for hosting. Thanks for the Vikings for holding this. Thanks for all the kids that joined, the great questions. Again, I would just challenge you to continue to educate yourselves on your Black history. Continue to be proud of your Black history, and just know that there is a positive future out there if we continue to fight for one another and continue to hold each other to a high standard. And I'm encouraged by the next generation. I actually am.
Lastly, Coach Dre.
Thanks for having me. It was the highlight of my day. Well, I really appreciate it. And I just say, to you young people out there, hey, whatever you want in life, you can achieve it. Okay? Don't ever let anybody hold you down. Believe in yourself. All of us go through struggles. Every day is not going to be great. Okay? But if you continue to believe in yourself, you continue to believe in your own self-worth, you can be whatever you want to be. And there's power in education. Okay? There's power in education. No one can ever take your education away from you. One day Anthony Barr is going to stop being a football player, just like the great Steve Jordan was. Okay? One day I'm going to stop coaching football. Okay? I'm not going to be that anymore. Okay? But the education that I got through my life will stay with me until the day they put me in the ground. So there's power in education. Don't ever stop learning. The more education you get, the stronger you come as a person. Again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. And my final advice is, just work hard, stay positive, and like Coach Dre and Barr and Steve Jordan said, believe in yourself. But last but not least, on behalf of the Minnesota Vikings, thank you all for joining us today for the Minnesota Vikings Black History Month panel discussion. Enjoy the rest of your week. We hope you guys leave here inspired and leave here motivated, more importantly, and get out in your community and be that change. Thank you all. Thank you, Everfi. Thank you, everyone that was involved.